Welcome everybody to another episode of DUCKIT, where we host Ghassan, the founder and CEO of Emerge. Thank you for joining us, Ghassan.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so I know you. I think Steve knows you a little bit. I've kind of followed your career, and we've been kind of having like 1 or 2 degrees of separation for the last 10 years or so. I'm familiar with your journey so far, but I would love for you to introduce us, to Emerge and where it started.
Yeah, totally, Chris. So Emerge is an acquirer and operator of digital shopping sites, deal sites, saving sites, that sort of thing. Personally, I've been in the e-commerce game for about a decade now, hard to believe. And, really through my iterations of scaling startups in my mid-20s through to now, something was crystal clear along the way, which was to say that small to medium-sized e-commerce companies, and really technology companies for that matter, are really sort of in a compromising position. And at the end of the day, everyone is shooting to go unicorn status, as you know, more than ever these days, and really very few make it. And the result is that a lot of good businesses that deserve a chance end up getting stuck in the middle. And what that results in is either premature sort of sale at a suboptimal level, or really sort of unwinding the business or bankruptcy, really. Yeah. And we're starting to see more and more of that. And so Emerge was really a contrarian play, if you will, on acquiring valuable assets and merging them together under a universal platform and engine and a shared playbook, where we would take the best out of each company or startup and put them together to make something bigger and better and more sustainable. And so doing that, at the end of the day, it's really sort of a customer acquisition arbitrage play. Because if you know a bit about e-commerce, which I'm sure you guys do, one of the biggest challenges is customer acquisition costs, right? And that's sometimes the main reason why a lot of startups aren't profitable, is because they're going after more and more expensive ways to acquire customers aggressively in their quest to be number one market share wise. But that results in tremendously sort of exorbitant losses, which is kind of what you saw ranging from, Uber all the way to WeWork. WeWork had other problems, obviously, and sort of down the spectrum. So Emerge was sort of more a profitable scale up, an M&A driven play, an acquisition, a disciplined acquisition, capital allocation play. And so that's kind of really sort of from the learnings that we got from our original days in e-commerce. And so that's kind of what we do now. And just to sort of give you a sense, we've acquired 4 companies across North America. We have about 2.3 million members that shop on our various sites and save and explore new merchant offerings, ranging from groceries to essentials, to playing golf, to staycations nearby. So you name it, we're looking to help, sort of drive consumers saving on a wide array of products.
Thanks for the introduction, man. You guys have been quite active. Now, you made it quite clear that, your play was what did you call it, like a contrarian play? Now that environment and the reason you were doing things kind of the other way around, what's the underlying reason for this scale or die, or this appetite for unlimited growth? Where did that come from? Like, a lot of people argue that it's kind of driven and fed into by VCs or by the money. This appetite to kind of always see a hockey stick curve and fund it. Is that a fair kind of assumption? Is that what you guys kind of were fighting against?
Yeah, so like, just to give you a bit of background, like in my first venture, we basically were victim to the scale or die model. We started what was Canada's first daily deal site at the time, ended up being the largest independent player, a company called TeamBuy. And we scaled it from 0 to 120 employees. I was, 27 years old on my first venture. We had, world-renowned investors ranging from inside venture partners out of New York all the way to Russia to Italy. So it was a big thing. And we realized that with the capital that came from VCs came an expectation to grow at all costs, right? And to scale or die, as you said. And that's really premised on sort of how these VCs are built, what their model entails, which is sort of, it's a numbers game for them. And if you're going to be $100 or $200 million company, well, that's not all that interesting to them. It may be interesting to you as an entrepreneur and to your team, to build a market leader in one country or in a region. But they're really eyeing what used to be $1 billion, but now it sounds like more like $10 billion or $100 billion exits. So the strong message was, grow market share, become number one, and that will in itself enable you to exit. We found out, and so many others did as well in my first venture, that that's not necessarily true for many, right? Especially if the macro environment, sort of flips on you. If capital markets aren't there, or if the model is not sexy anymore, all of a sudden you're stuck in a situation where VCs don't want to fund you because they're not on to the next shiny subject, and that's when you're screwed, right? So that's when you're screwed. And so for us with Emerge, it was kind of like, okay, well, we went through this. We did exactly what we were supposed to in my first venture. We outcompeted 120 different deal sites to prevail as number one by market share, but that just wasn't enough. And so with Emerge, it was more like, okay, well, if many e-commerce and technology companies are going through this conundrum, maybe there's an opportunity to now step in and be an acquirer of valuable businesses that have great member bases, that have great merchant relationships, but just have crappy P&L and balance sheets, right? Because of the too many overheads and too much expectation on growth, and very little discipline on sort of the cost side. It was an opportunity that we saw to come in and literally merge e-commerce companies, and that's what Emerge stands for.
Cool. And so then, what's your position in the sense that if capital markets do get active again in industries where you operate, and that irrational kind of scaling approach comes back into the market, how competitive do you feel, right? So if e-commerce for some reason becomes sexy again and the capital markets go crazy and they finance a scale or die kind of business model again, and we've seen it here in the region, that's why I'm bringing it up. If that happens again in Canada, how confident are you in your business model in order to be able to compete on that customer acquisition if somebody's coming in and paying 2x or 3x what you're doing? How do you compete longer term?
Look, it's a great question, and you pointed out the region, which obviously, I'm from Jordan, from Amman, and really have close ties to the region. Back every about 6 months or so, maybe not so much this year, with everything going on just yet. But I do think that different regions are at different chapters, obviously, in the game, and so obviously the Middle East is still very much in scale mode, in kind of get that blanket penetration mode, which is about 5 to 7 years, maybe even 10 years behind sort of markets in North America, which is where Emerge is focused. We started with Canada, where we have some assets in the US as well. But I think, look, to answer your question, I actually think e-commerce today is the hottest it's ever been, and that's in part because of what's going on with COVID. As you know, Shopify, a Canadian company, just eclipsed RBC, the biggest bank here, as the the most valuable company in Canada. A 14-year-old startup is the most valuable company in Canada. Amazon is practically at around all-time highs. Wayfair, shot up 35 or 40% the other day because they said they're seeing these crazy, they're seeing Black Friday volume every day right now during COVID. So e-commerce is ultra hot right now, and but I think that there is this general sentiment, and I do believe, like I've been talking about, Chris, like I've been talking about this for 3 or 4 years when no one was listening. But I think when Uber started talking about going public was sort of the peak moment where we're like, okay, maybe now people are going to be like, well, like if the best of the best in the entire world, this, 8-10 years, whatever it was, out, still losing crazy money, crazy amounts of capital, then will they ever be profitable? And that was kind of the discussion that Amazon was facing, the challenges Amazon was facing, and eventually it made it happen. The problem isn't Uber or Amazon. Those models, say what you want about them, but the people behind them have created enormous value for themselves, for their ecosystems. There's no doubt, okay? The problem is everyone in between.
Yeah.
Billions and billions of dollars getting poured into startups, the number 2s and 3s and 4s and 8s and 10s, you know, all those bets around the world, they are really sort of gambling to either make it or die, right? And so Emerge basically initially was founded on acquiring everybody that was about to die, and doing so very cost effectively compared to what it would have cost us to build them from the ground up.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I say that is like, you know, we've seen in the market over here, and you know, I played a little bit of a role in that organization as well. But we've seen, you know, super, you know, funded e-commerce brands
Sure.
come in and take the market by storm, and in a span of 2 years, you know, take the lion's share of the market, and that's because of that irrational, you know, story that you're talking about, right? And you know, the more established, even Amazons of the world, who might have had to step up, are still not able to compete in the region for various reasons, not just
Sure.
money. But generally speaking, it seems that, you know, although your approach is definitely more sustainable and makes complete sense, is building a sustainable, responsible business. It kind of feels like you still get a bit exposed if that irrationality still comes back in, right? So longer term, it sounds like your play works. Your play is logical, rational, is the right way to build a business. But it still feels like, as long as those capital markets are incentivized, you know, to kind of raise a ton of money, place a bunch of money, inflate that business, you know, get them to, you know, show their hockey stick curve. As long as that kind of, for lack of a better word, greed exists in the capital markets, then it'll be a cyclical kind of return of this in every industry, right? So, you know, I applaud you for your courage and your ability to stick to your kind of game plan, but it also sounds like, you know, unless, you know, business people, capital markets entrepreneurs become more responsible, then, you know, this is going to repeat itself time and time again.
Well, look, I mean, your point is valid when it comes to the VC community. And again, not all regions are equal. Like the Middle East is primarily playing a mini Silicon Valley game in terms of how it's built and structured. In more mature capital markets, you know, say here, like we've stayed away from the VC crowd. I don't have a single venture capitalist on board. We have about 120 investors in Emerge, all of which are either entrepreneurs, family offices, sort of niche strategic partners. So we kind of intentionally stayed away from the VC community. And if I'm completely honest, the VC community probably stayed away from us, because we're not building, you know, the next unicorn. We're talking about EBITDA when people are talking about sales growth. And so for me, the $1 billion valuation is about, in my mind, what's the path to $50 million in EBITDA, right, in profit. And I don't think too many people think that way. And so we will always, not that we compete there, but we would never be able to play the VC game now. Like we're a diversified, like think of the things I'm saying, like profit, like what's that, right, in the VC world? And we're a diversified portfolio. Like we're not focused on one thing to be the best in the world at one thing. Like I can't even get meetings that way if I wanted to with VCs. Like that's just not what they're set up as. And for us, let me sort of bring this to sort of COVID and what we're seeing lately. The reason Emerge is seeing double-digit growth, even during COVID, in fact, at an accelerated rate, is because we have the benefit of this diversified portfolio. So we did sell experiences, we still do, but of course, a lot of that's been halted now because people can't go outside and go to concerts and events and nearby staycations. But because we have groceries, because we have essentials, because we have product, we're able to sort of, you know, really just sort of change what we had on our virtual shelves and you know, move the needle to match consumer demands. So I do think these are, you know, concepts that, you know, are as good as, you know, history has shown, you know, Warren Buffett being sort of the big example of the diversified portfolio at scale with an emphasis on cash flow. But you just don't have that benefit with VCs because that's not what they're focused on. So yeah, we will never be able to compete there, but we don't want to.
Yeah, it's incredible. When you look at the region over here, I mean, you know, 3-4 years ago, VCs were, needles in haystacks, and today they're a dime a dozen, right? In terms of kind of the way they've scaled themselves. And arguably, they're one of the same, a lot of them, because they're just, derivatives or dilutions of family offices or mega funds, right, with the same kind of, objective. So I'd really love to get into the details of understanding how your business model kind of works. The economies of scale, diversifying, et cetera. How does that come to play, and how do you kind of figure out, your M&A strategy, where you're going to grow, which industries, where you're going to diversify to, territorially, et cetera, and not just industry-wise? Could you tell us a bit about how you figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, it started with operating, a single, at its peak, $60 million business, and recognizing in e-commerce, and recognizing firsthand that every e-commerce company has to plug into a bunch of, vendors, whether that's, email, sending, fraud prevention, customer service, analytics, hosting, all of that, every e-commerce company has to essentially set up, right? So when I'm looking at all these niche businesses, whether they sell groceries, essentials, golf, they all kind of need to do the same thing. And there's really no need for every single one of them to do it. So for us, we're not only sort of consolidating all of them on a universal platform where they share resources, but we're also striking group pricing for the entire portfolio. So there's a savings, sort of a boring synergies savings play in the background, right, to set up everybody on a single platform. Then there's the cross-selling ability, right? So like groceries, right? We're one of the biggest. My mom says, like, what are you selling these days? You can't sell experiences. What are you doing? And I'm like, Mom, like, keep up with the times. We're one of the nation's largest frozen meat sellers. We've been able to bring in grocery and start delivering frozen meats in the thousands to our customers. So, that cross-selling opportunity is right away. Well, groceries now is top of mind for everybody. I don't care who you are, right? And for us now, we've been able to take that grocery vertical and essentially put it across our entire portfolio of 2.3 million members, and overnight become a competitor in that sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So cross-selling is
What happened?
Did you guys get lost too?
Was it me, or did I get lost, or just you guys?
No, everyone just froze on my end. Did you guys?
Let me tell you my theory. The VCs did not like what I was saying. Instructed their technology companies.
I hope the pause was. Yeah, I hope the pause was recorded. That would be amazing.
The Silicon Valley gods have spoken.
Boom.
That was all of us. I thought it was just
we
me.
just got muzzled, guys. Let's change topic. Oh man. Yeah. Burn money. Yeah. Growth. That's hilarious. Yeah, sorry about that, man.
So I was saying.
Continue.
No worries. So we were saying, saving cost savings, cross-selling opportunities, and sitting on all of that data and packaging it up for the benefit of the overall group, and is also very important. And of course, setting up management, back office, capital raising efforts, everything's consolidated for all of these groups so they can just focus on crushing their niche.
And arguably, when you do these mergers, these acquisitions, these organizations themselves get restructured in order to fit well with the rest of the puzzle, right? So you don't need their full operation capacity. You don't need tools that maybe you already have tools for. So there is consolidation that goes in with it in the process of the merge itself. So when you're doing your DDs on these companies and you're seeing how they can fit into the rest of your organization, those efficiencies are even improved in the process of the merger too, right? So what you're buying isn't the ideal state yet. It will become at some point. Is that typically how you look at it?
So there are two types of acquisitions we normally go after, right? There's the de-stressed or out of favor acquisition, which would be a typical case. For example, we acquired a business called WagJag from the largest publication Canada called the Toronto Star. It's their legacy deals business, and it's sort of a moms and families deal site. And when we acquired it, it was shrinking and loss making. and it was mismanaged and it was bloated. And we came in and sort of picked it up for practically peanuts, right? Like nothing, and that's an example of a business that 2 years later has driven over almost $30 million in sales. It's profitable. It's growing at a 15 to 20% clip, which again, in that space, in the absence of crazy marketing dollars, that's a very healthy organic growth rate, 8, 9, 10 years into the business, right? And so that's an example of sort of, and many people say, well, is that private equity? Because you're kind of coming in, you're cleaning it up. I say there are some similarities in the sense that there's that discipline, right? But we are operators. We're not sort of doing just banking, financial engineering. Like that's something I always make clear, is we're operating these assets one at a time. So that's one example, the de-stressed business. The other side is, and this is practically probably unavailable in the Middle East for now, but it's coming, is we're finding these gems, sort of like these niche secret market leaders in little niches. For example, when we acquired the golf business most recently, right? That's like a $30 million sales business. It's close to a $3 million EBITDA business. It's 12 people only, like staff, founder owned and operated, no debt, clean cap table, bootstrapped, core team. We kept everybody, we kept the brand, and all we're doing is help them accelerate it to the next level any way we can through our portfolio, resources. So we kind of keep that intact. Those are the two examples of how we acquire companies.
So then on the last example, like maybe because we live in a world where VCs still, narrate the market, how do you get a positive EBITDA business to sell? I mean, arguably it's making money, the business is healthy. Why would the owner who owns the most of the business want to sell? I mean, arguably that's, the ideal position to be in.
Yeah, it's honestly, in my opinion, the way we approach this is it's a structuring issue. There's an inherent structuring inefficiency in the way VCs set things up with founders. Because say with Underpar, a business that we acquired for $12 million, about 10 million upfront, a couple of million in deferred, and potentially earn out above the 12. But let's just call it 12 for the example. In this case, the founder owns about 80% plus of the business, never raised money, right? So they bootstrapped it over 8, 9 years. And, the founder stands to gain, 9, 10 million bucks out of the transaction. If you look at that from a VC lens, in a typical VC company, for a founder to make 9, 10 million bucks, they'd have to sell their business for like 100 or 150 million, or even 200 in some cases, if the cap table is screwed up and anti-founder. And so, so that allows us to structure a win-win, give the founder a good chunk of capital in their pocket, at the same time, have some shares in the go-forward company, have a performance-based plan if they crush it over the next 2-3 years. And that all of a sudden makes sense. And so it's, the structuring of bootstrap businesses allows for, much more reasonable EBITDA-based valuations that are grounded in reality to happen.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And then would it be fair to assume that COVID being an environment that is accelerating the demise of badly run businesses, let's just call it that for now, is COVID basically an environment where organizations like yours that have the strategy of, let's say M&As and acquisitions, is this the ideal kind of, event for you guys to kind of scale and accelerate your strategy?
Yeah, well, we'd never like to sort of refer to it as an ideal time when so many people are.
Sure, excuse my portrayal of the moment. Yeah.
But you are right in the sense that, look, like this is our big moment. Business-wise, I think it's both badly run businesses that are going to be hurt, but of course, businesses that are just at the wrong place at the wrong time kind of thing also are going to have a tough time. Like if you're just an events business, that's just tough, man, right? Like you're not going to get concerts anytime soon. And that's a, precarious position to be in. But, larger point, Emerge for us, the fact that we're diversified, that we're showing, good growth, like stellar growth especially in sort of groceries and essentials. And the fact that the M&A climate has become even more opportunistic now. Yes, it is an opportune time. We're planning to make additional acquisitions this year, and of course, we're plotting our path to, as I said, $50 million in EBITDA, which we believe is a sustainable $1 billion plus company, and we want to achieve that in the next couple of years.
And when do we see you guys kind of cross the ocean and start to participate in our side again, and you come home? When do we see you kind of activate your business model over here?
Now you sound like my mom.
Well, I mean, it's a different tune, man. You're singing a different tune, and I think that it would be refreshing to have, that kind of mindset over here.
Look, yeah, I mean, I think, look, it's important that we've looked at all regions, and obviously I'm somewhat biased to the Middle East in the sense that I think it's a massive opportunity. I think you can make outsized returns if you know what you're doing. And frankly, some of this is quite simple, but like there are incredible arbitrage opportunities in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. You're seeing some of these product companies. Of course, some of them are really well funded, but you can build massive businesses, and I'm talking bigger than what we have here. But again, the profitability dynamic, I don't know if the market supports that yet. We're interested. I mean, on a personal level, I've looked at the Middle East. I've considered some investments. I write some checks into startups, internationally, but I haven't done much in the Middle East yet. I have been looking at a few opportunities. I think that time will come. I mean, I think we got to solidify our, we've sort of proven our thesis, but we got to solidify our own scale and our own profitability to start venturing into international markets beyond North America. Because as you've seen, and as we've seen so many times, startups make the mistake of jumping into unfamiliar territory. And I know firsthand, I mean, I hear the stories and I'm close to the ground. So I know how complicated the Middle Eastern market is, but that's an opportunity if you partner with the right folks. So exactly. I think it's coming, but I think it'll take a bit more time because we're focused on building that extra scale here. And there's no shortage of pipeline now, obviously, as we were mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, arguably one of the biggest challenges of e-commerce in the region, especially for new players, is kind of the logistics, the operations on the ground in terms of the maturity of the infrastructure of the countries where we operate, right? I think, outside of Dubai, if we take, Dubai, in a class of its own, if you look at Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, et cetera, operating an e-commerce business can be operationally cumbersome, especially when you compare those markets like US and Canada where you're more familiar. So the cost of success and the appetite for risk needs to be a bit higher, undoubtedly, right? So yeah, but I still think, the reality of the world that we live in today, I think is a perfect kind of environment for organizations that have the right mindset and experience that you guys have, to venture out a little bit. But yeah, absolutely. I totally get it. You got to walk before, you run, and you got to figure it out. So in terms of, where do you see the future of Emerge then? Could you kind of, shed some light in terms of, where you're going next, what industries you're looking at? Could you just, give us a heads up on what you guys are working on?
Yeah, funny story for you. Like, before we called it Emerge, I was considering, or at least pitched my partners on the name Boring Commerce, and then shortly after, Elon Musk came out with the Boring Company. And I still remind them that look, I came up with that first.
You should at least bought the domain, dude.
That's right. And the reason I wanted to call it the Boring Commerce, we were at a friend's cottage, and I saw this magazine that had the title "Boring is Brilliant," and it was sort of highlighting a bunch of ultra boring businesses that were cash flow focused that no one had ever heard about, and that were everything that a lot of cooler companies were aiming to be eventually, like when they were at scale, right? But these guys were doing it from the beginning. So the reason I bring that story up is because, as you asked, like, I think everything we're doing is super disciplined and focused. We're going to continue to acquire nice little $2, $3, $4 million EBITDA businesses. That adds up over time. Yeah. If we can continue to keep it organized, if we can continue to go deeper and deeper and match consumer demands with our verticals, then that is the Emerge proposition, right? So nothing splashy, nothing sexy, and I think grocery obviously is now front and center, so we see opportunities in the broader food market. And I think there's golf has proven to be a very sticky vertical. If you were to choose one experience to be in during COVID, golf is it. Actually, the US deemed golf essential. I'm not sure how much that says about their politicians, but I think that we are not going to complain. And golf is, again, in all fairness, no friction sport. It's a relaxation sport. You go, you walk out on the grass and so forth. So I think that's a vertical we want to continue to acquire businesses in, and again, the fundamentals work really well. The golf courses are sitting on all of this real estate, and they really need more people through the door to come in and play golf at a discount, and then come in, bring a friend. Eventually when they reopen the clubhouses, have a drink, have a bite. So golf is a big vertical, and I do think experiences will come back, but more and more I'm starting to believe, and we're starting to prepare for the nearby staycations rather than international travel. I think that's going to be plagued for a little while, but the nearby, everybody can't wait to go away for 2 hours, rent out some, in our case, cottage, or go out to, Niagara on the lake, or go to a winery. Like that sort of thing is coming back big time. And it's one of the verticals we have already set up.
But, Emerge as a business, you were saying, acquiring these, $2, $3, $4, or $5 million EBITDA positive businesses eventually add up. And the way you kind of described or worded, you said, was eventually it could become, a $1 billion business evaluation when you add all these things up. Is that kind of like where you feel you'll be comfortable, and kind of your strategy would have finally felt like it's paid off, and now I've reached kind of my longer term objective? Is that what you're kind of eyeing?
I mean, for me, Emerge is all a second coming of sorts, right? Because it's sort of I want to call it a big final chapter of all my work preceding it. It's been a 10-year run in e-commerce, and we want to really see it through. And I personally want to build that legacy to prove that a very difficult loss-making model can be done in a better, more efficient, more sustainable way. So for me, we're not setting a goal to say, hey, let's get to X or Y. I don't frankly focus on just the valuation per se. That's how we got 100+ people around this, is because we said, look, we're going to be rational, we're going to be disciplined, and we're going to be logical, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're building this on. To set sort of an end goal is a bit in my mind early, although it feels like it's been a long time. But look, we're going to be rational. If some major portfolio e-commerce company comes and says, hey, we want this portfolio or whatnot, we'll obviously be open-minded about that. But yeah, the goal is to scale up. I'd like to reach some really big levels and at scale, and then we'll see.
And the reason I was asking that question was, if you reach that $1 billion valuation, let's say next year, the year after, let's say the next 5 years, that would mean it took you, 12, 15 years to reach that milestone. And when you compare that comparatively to at least unicorns that we've seen in the region over here, that timeline compares kind of well to it as well. So, I mean, this scale or die narrative versus this rational, logical approach to building businesses seems to, compete quite successfully if you take a step back on a macro level and you just look at those milestones. So I guess at some point you could argue that your strategy achieves the scale, achieves the valuation, but much more rationally and a much more risk-averse, manner.
Yeah, and here's the trick, and here's sort of really the key piece that I want to add. We have a logical path to arrive to that. The scale or die businesses are completely held captive by market dynamics, market conditions, investor sentiment, whether the model is hot or not. So you'll need everything to get right, to be right, to arrive at that sort of level for a startup. Versus, I feel like on our end, I think things are more predictable. We're acquiring proven businesses that are spitting out cash flow. And even if we don't get there, you know what? If I'm half right, we're a $20-25 million EBITDA business, right? And we're diversified and the portfolio is running. And yeah, maybe we're not as sexy and maybe not many people want to buy it, but I'm okay making $25 million a year.
I mean, run the plays, don't throw a Hail Mary, right? So, all right, man. I'm on board with that, definitely. I think Steve and I have had experiences on the scale or die, definitely positive experiences and great stories that we could share. But I think we've come to the realization that it's just not sustainable. I mean, yesterday, Uber posted their quarterly loss, and I think it was 3 billion or so. So yeah, I think we're gonna see businesses consolidate. We're gonna see industries consolidate. We're gonna see businesses get more responsible. And I think what you're saying, what you've been saying for 3 years plus, I think is I think gonna spread. I think out of force, unfortunately, not out of kind of let's say intellect or rational thinking. But anyways, Ghassan, really appreciated you coming on the show. I really thank you for your time. It's quite early for you, but thanks a lot, and I hope we'll have you on again before the end of this year to talk about when you're coming to the market. And I won't nag you about that. I'm not going to play mom, but yeah, we need that narrative.
For what it's worth, I love what you guys are doing. Again, a student of the space, and I feel like there isn't enough quality and honest content out there on the broader tech space, and I'm very happy to see you guys you're pushing through with your vision here, and I'll be tuning in. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Thanks, Ghassan.
Cheers.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.